My name's Larry Smith. I was born and raised in Missoula, Montana, a rather large city for Montana. So I lived in the city, raised in the city. However, fortunately, my grandparents lived in the Bitterroot Valley, and I spent almost every summer up there with them. And then my other grandparents were also up there, and he was a prospector and a hunting guide. So we spent much of our time hunting, hiking the mountains, and doing prospecting. It was fun. It was good. It's a good way to grow up. And when I graduated from high school, actually before I graduated from high school, I went down and was going to join the service. Walked in the door, recruiter said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a pilot." He laughed at me, kicked me out of the office. So I came back the next day and just joined straight up. I got to boot camp in July of 1968, and everybody, I'm sure, hears about Marine Corps boot camp. As soon as you get there, you got to step on the yellow footprints and all stand in line and everything, and it's true. And you are no longer an individual, you're a group, and that's what the Marine Corps does, is basically tears you down as an individual and works with you to work as a team, the whole platoon that you're going through your training with. And then from there, I went to sniper school and then Republic of South Vietnam. And we landed in Da Nang in mid-February. When you fly over Vietnam, it's got to be one of the most beautiful countries there is, as far as, you know, green and lush and heavy mountains, and see the rice paddies. But you're not prepared for when that plane lands, then you open the door and that heat hits you, it about knocks you out. It's just heavy humidity. But anyhow, we were processed, and we made our assignments were made, and I was assigned to Mike Company, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, who were presently at that time on the DMZ. First night there, they put you out on a LP, a listening post. Basically what it is, you're out on top of a mountain, and you're just down from the perimeter. You're an early warning listening position. So your first night there, kind of eye-opener. They say don't fall asleep, and there's no way a person could fall asleep that had never done that before, because you just think every little snap, crackle, and pop is your friends coming after you. One time while I was there, we were on the mountain. We'd been there for about, I'd say a month, and I happened to look over the horizon, and it's just beautiful and lush, and I just saw this big puff of white smoke, and I said, hey Sarge, did you see that? You see what? I said, see that puff of smoke? Isn't that pretty? He threw me to the ground, told everybody to hit the deck, and what it was the NVA firing a 122 rocket at us. Luckily it went over top of us and hit down below us on the other side of the mountain. So, you know, that's another learning step. Another time we went on a patrol, and the foliage is so dense that you fall in trails, and basically that's all you see when you see the trails, because it's so dense. And sometimes the foliage over your head, you can't even see the blue sky. You know it's there, but it's dark. I was tail end Charlie with another Marine. We heard some voices, but our squad was going up the hill, but this squad, we heard these voices like off to our left, but down a little bit. Couldn't figure what the heck. And then we listened real close, and they were speaking Vietnamese. Well, we're on the DMZ, the only Vietnamese there are the MVA. But we sat and listened for a minute, but the squad kept going. They didn't see us stop. So we ran up to them and reported it to the sergeant, and then there's nothing we could do because we didn't know how big the force was. We couldn't see them, so they just called in some artillery on them in those positions. Another time we went on another patrol, and we were right on the DMZ. I mean, across the stream was North Vietnam. And we come across a large battalion-size billet, and it was a billeting area. They had bunkers and hospitals and campfires. I mean, we were told to spend the night there because it was already late. That was kind of spooky. And we spent the night, set up a perimeter, and the next day they sent Marine engineers in who blew up all the facilities and everything. Interesting times, and it was a growing up time. You learn to grow up, you learn to not take things for granted and be suspicious of everything. Our typical day, there was a company on the hill, and we were one of the platoons, and then my squad, or sometimes the platoon, would go out on patrols. And we would be assigned certain areas to patrol, got our maps in our hand and our grids where we were going, and we had objective points. We'd hit an objective point at a certain time of the day type of thing, supposed to rest 5 minutes, then move on. But anyhow, we'd do the patrols, and then there's times where we'd bivouac overnight, set up perimeters right on the trails, and come back. And then there's other days you had the day off. You're up on the hill, you had perimeter duty, this type of thing, and someone else was out doing the patrols. Whenever we go out, we would be fully loaded as far as our weapons, plenty of ammunition in case we needed it, because you just don't have an instant resupply right there. We'd always have extra ammunition for the machine guns. We'd have extra ammunition for the mortars. You were always carrying 50 plus pounds of extra gear besides your own gear too. After we did our patrols with the heavy foliage in our hand, they actually had C-130s fly in. They started spraying all the foliage. Well, at the time we didn't know what it was. We just figured it was a defoliant, which it turned out it was, also known as Agent Orange. But they'd sit there and spray the foliage on our hand, and the next day or so we were out patrolling in the same area. It was just one of those things that it needed to be done, because otherwise infiltration into South Vietnam would continue massively. When we were out in the field, we ate C rations. We never had chow brought into us or anything like that. These are C rations, come in a little box and little cans inside of that, and it's leftover chow from World War II and Korea. And it was better than nothing, and if you have to pack that with you, that's more pounds. And one time I spilled my beans. I picked them up and ate them because I packed them and I was not going to give them to the ants. After being there for about 2 months, my staff sergeant came up to me and he said, we're going to send you to a landmine warfare school. Chopper came in, picked me up, and I went to Da Nang and went to landmine warfare school. During the day, the popular forces, basically, we would have anywhere from 7 to 30, depending on what commitments we had. And when not being used during the day, they'd go home. They'd go back to their families and work their fields and this type of thing. During our patrols up on the DMZ, during that 2-month period, I never saw any combat. But down where I was, we were always having contact every day, if not every other day, one form or another. As a matter of fact, a couple of our little smaller units, they were pretty much wiped out. They were overrun and stuff, and you could hear it on the radio, but you couldn't do anything. It was too far away for us to get to them, let alone being ambushed on the way to there if we were close enough. It was a lot of good Marines lost their lives in those programs, but still a good thing to do. While on one of our patrols, we had just recently had an airstrike in the area, which we had called in, and we come across a hedgerow. The hedgerows were kind of like the same hedgerows in Normandy. They were so thick that you couldn't get. They were fences for the farmers. Well, we heard some noise on the other side, and we had to find out what it was. So myself and another Marine were able to work our way through the hedgerow, and no sooner we got up and started looking around, here comes this water buffalo charging us. He had been wounded from the airstrike and was mighty upset. Well, the only thing we could do is try to defend ourselves, and we both put a full clip of ammo in him and before he finally fell, but we had to pay for the buffalo to the farmer. Oh well, we're alive and it was dead, so. We had gone on another patrol, and before we left, the rear headquarters said, hey, we got a 60 millimeter mortar just sitting here, and we want you to take it with you. So we said, sure, but we'd been trained with it a little bit in boot camp, but none of us were proficient with it, but we packed the stupid thing. So anyhow, we're going out and we come across, there's a village, there's a railroad track, and across the railroad track was a village, and off to our left was a large hill. And once we came out of the jungle part and we were kind of exposed, we started receiving fire, and we received fire from both from the village and from the hill. Well, I said set up the mortar, and I think the rounds are coming from the top of the hill. Sorry, at the base of the hill. So the guys set it up, and they set off the first round, and it landed on top of the hill. And I said, well, forget that. And, and eventually I called in an airstrike, and was able to take care of the VC. But in the meantime, the Air Force forward observer in a little Piper Cub was flying over, and he's the one that coordinated the airstrike. And he said, did you guys fire on top of the hill? I said, yeah, we were trying to fire down below. And he said, well, good shot, because you wiped out a machine gun plus a crew of 3. So I screwed up, did it right. Another patrol a little later, we were a blocking force for the South Vietnamese Army who were doing a sweep within our area. And we were there over 8 hours for the day, and it pretty hot, and basically out in the middle of a rice paddy. And the rice paddies were dry this time of season. And I'd been walking back and forth with checking on our popular forces and the Marines with us and everything. And about that time, it was probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was getting close to the end of the Arvin sweep, and one of our popular forces came down with heat stroke. Well, heat stroke's pretty dangerous, so we needed to call a medevac in for him. And I was going back over to check on him to see how soon, how much longer the corpsman said he's going to last. And I'm walking on the dike that I've been walking all day long. Somebody called me from the rear, and I pivoted on my foot, and when I did that, all of a sudden I felt my foot move, and I looked down, and there was a little bit of smoke coming out of the ground. I said, and I looked up, and I had 30 popular forces and my Marine and everything with it, and I couldn't see a soul. They were so deep down in the ground, taking cover. And finally, one of them said, hit the deck. And I said, well, a little late for that. I'm afraid to take my foot off of that. I don't know what it's going to do. So eventually, I took my foot off of it, and we cleared out of the area. And what it was a, what they call a bouncing Betty. We'd had one of our other popular forces earlier in the month step on one, and it killed him outright. So anyhow, we were able to finally get the medevac in, got the popular force out, and then we started leaving the area. And as we walked around a corner, there was an explosion, and we looked back, and there was just smoke and dust going straight up. It was just one of those things that had been in the ground for so long. We realized that the prongs had leaked, and the charge didn't go off then. I believe in the Lord, but I didn't want to always watch me that close. And it kind of sent shivers down my back. On another patrol, we were notified that there was some enemy action in our area. So we were out on our patrol, and while out, we came under fire, heavy fire as a matter of fact. And we were kind of in an exposed area. So it was the first time I had the opportunity to call in artillery. And I called the fire order in. When an artillery round is fired, you can actually hear it go through the air, especially when it's going over your head. Well, we heard it coming. I told everybody to hit the deck that weren't already hitting the deck. And all I could think of in my head is that I had called artillery out in front of us, but it was coming right at us. So I just stood up, and they said, hit the deck. And I said, no, I want to be the first one to go. I don't have to answer questions on this one. Well, anyhow, it landed over us in another rice paddy. And I counseled check fired the artillery order. And they came back to us later that evening that that fire base had a heavy fire order from the previous day, and they fired all night long and hadn't had time to recalibrate their artillery. And they said that's what was wrong. It wasn't me, it was them. It wasn't really their fault either. They'd just been so busy they hadn't had time. And that was what I was told. So it was a learning lesson again. I was sent to Combined Action Group, and there you learn the lifestyle of the people, the politics of the people. We were taught the basics of language because our job was to go out. It would be 7 Marines, 1 corpsman, and we lived in the villages. And every day we moved from one village to another. Some of those units had compounds where they were in actual compound areas and bunkers and trenches and everything. And they went on patrols just like we did. During the daytime we'd be on patrols, nighttime ambushes and patrols. But also during the daytime we'd organize health and hygiene classes for the kids, how to properly bathe. And a lot of them would have skin ulcers like in their head. And if our corpsman couldn't fix them up, we'd medevac to the nearest hospital. I like to get to know the people, you know, and there's some villagers that were leery of you. There were some villagers that had open arms. We had a mama son that when we went to that village, she would always have some hot soup for us or whatever, and then we'd always donate our sea rats, and they even got better. I had a couple little girls that I got to know. I think they were maybe 7 or 8, that type of thing, and they were sisters. And I found out that they couldn't go to school that year that I was there because Mom and Dad didn't have the money. Well, I said, well, how much is it? Well, basically in US dollars, it was $5 a kid. So I paid the $5 so they go to school that year. It's just those little things that you can do to help the people and everything. It's just, I'm glad I was put into that program. I was with them for the rest of my tour in Vietnam. I left there in March of '70, came back from there. I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and during that time we were training for riot control in Washington, D.C. We were in a platoon formation one day and they come out and said, who here wants to get out of the Marine Corps? Yeah, why not? So I got out. Went back to Missoula, went to the University of Montana for a year. After a year, I kind of got tired of, that's when, you know, demonstrations, riots, burning the American flag and everything. I said, I'm tired of this. And I contacted the recruiter and said, I want to go back in. He said, well, it's kind of hard right now because, you know, down from Vietnam, a lot of people are being discharged. He said, I'll put a package in. Well, about 3 months later, he called me and said, you still want to go in? I totally forgot I even did it. I said, yeah, when? He says, as soon as you got your bags packed. So I had a choice to go to Morocco, Spain, Yokosuka, Japan. I chose Yokosuka, went to Yokosuka, and when I got there, Sergeant Major said that I took criminology in college, so he says, are you interested in police work? I said, yes. He said, well, good, I'll put you with the Provost Marshal's office as an investigator for CID, criminal investigation. I said, okay. While I was in Marine Barracks Yokosuka, I met a young lady by the name of Billy, and we got to know each other a little bit, and she left, went back to the States. When I was transferred back, while on leave in Montana, I looked her up, called her a couple times, and we got together, and after a while, a year or so, we got married. You know, after, you know, you start out in war and you realize the amount of politics that's there.
The United States, as the world knows, will never start a war. We do not want a war. We do not now expect a war.
In Vietnam, it wasn't like World War II. You go out there, you have a front line, you do what you got to do and you get it done. I had multiple duty stations, floats with the Navy, out to sea for 6 months, back 6 months, out 6 months. All during this time, my family, Billy and the girls, were stayed behind. It was the November of 1990 that I retired from the Marine Corps, and we moved back to the Gresham area. Military life is it's a hard life, but it's a good life. I'd go back and do it again if I could, instantly. The body just won't let me do it, but I enjoyed it and I'd do it again.